It stood up against austerity measures as Greece faced its worst economic crisis. But the Syriza party ended up implementing them. Now that strategy is being put to the test as Greeks vote in a general election. So, will a new leadership emerge? And could it be the end of populism in this European country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras led his left-wing Syriza party to power in 2015 with promises that offered much hope to the Greek people. But fixing a country facing its gravest economic crisis in recent history proved to be a challenge. Rather than end the austerity measures that he'd campaigned against, Tsipras imposed more taxes. Giving in to creditors' demands, Greece exited its final bailout last year and the economy is expected to expand. But its unemployment rate is the highest in Europe and people are struggling to make ends meet. This has upset many voters who say they're in favour of the Conservative New Democracy Party. Polls show the party was tipped to win the snap general election on Sunday. John Saropoulos reports from Athens.
The main issue in this election is the economy. Syriza, which has been in power for the last 4.5 years, has nursed Greece out of its austerity program. In August of last year, Greece was declared fit to re-enter markets and has been successfully selling government bonds again. But what Syriza hasn't done is to bring Greece back to prosperity. After shrinking by 26% during the years of recession, the economy is now growing by about 2% a year, and that is the forecast for the foreseeable future. New Democracy, the opposition, say that that isn't enough to make good the damage that's been done, to stem the flow of young people leaving for better job markets. They want to boost the economy to at least 4% growth and create 700,000 new jobs in the next 4 years. So they will do this, they say, by lowering corporate taxes, taxes on individuals, on farmers, social security contributions, lowering the cost of labour and of doing business in Greece, and they will also streamline government so that it doesn't stand in the way of entrepreneurship. People seem to believe that New Democracy, despite being a party that helped to bankrupt Greece by overspending in the past, under its new technocratic leadership may be capable of delivering on that programme. And they certainly seem to be willing to see such a programme being implemented by any political force. I'm John Saropoulos for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our panel. In Athens via Skype, Dimitris Rapidis. He's a political advisor to the Syriza party. In London, Vicky Price. She is a chief economic advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. And also in Athens, European affairs analyst Yannis Koutsoumidis. Welcome to you all. I'd like to begin in Athens with Dimitris Rapidis. Your party said, or did rather, what it said it wasn't going to do, and now it's going to be punished in the general election. Is that right?
Well, it seems that from so far what we have from the polls is that New Democracy is ahead. On the polls, it seems that it's a very, very difficult fight, political struggle for Syriza. It's soon to have some final results, but it seems that the situation is difficult for the party, and it follows the defeat we had 3 weeks ago in the European Union elections.
So what's happening here is that you have an electorate that's unhappy with the policies that your government put in place, policies that you said you were never going to do, and then you did. So what's the next? What happens next for Syriza? Why did you even do that?
Well, there are a number of factors why Syriza is in this difficult position electorally. The first is that actually since 2015 we lost the so-called war on media, which is that domestically, which is that the majority of TV stations and private media were endorsing Mr. Mitsotakis from his very first day in office as head of the New Democracy, And mainly what they were doing is to spread propaganda against the government. The fact is that Syriza did actually, the Syriza government, Prime Minister Tsipras did actually manage to stabilize the economy after a long period of recession and austerity. We did actually were forced to adopt the third bailout deal and implement the tough austerity program, but at the same time, we managed to alleviate the damages for the most vulnerable groups, social groups, and create some fundamental safety nets while trying to address the huge humanitarian crisis that was inherited by the previous government. Another issue for the difficult position that Syriza stands right now, it's the fact that the Greek electorate in its majority is exhausted by austerity politics throughout those 8 years. And now this social negativity and this disappointment is reflected in the governing party in Syriza. And there is also another third factor, I would say, that can explain the fact that Syriza is losing forces, is the fact that the party itself didn't manage to build a strong organizational capacity throughout those 4 years, didn't manage to create and focus on how to build strong links with society, despite the fact that at the same time it did implement a pro-social political agenda.
Let me bring in Yanis Koutsametis, who's also in Athens. You're actually outside the Parliament building there. Is Dimitris right in his defence of Syriza party? Is it the fact that they tried to do everything they could, but simply they lost the middle-class vote?
Well, we need to go back to the 2015 drama to figure out how Syriza came to power. They were voted on a ticket of no austerity, debt relief, and better days regarding corruption and the social inequality in Greece. In these 4.5 years, they didn't manage to fight austerity. They were forced to sign a third bailout agreement, and the debt relief were not as extreme as they had promised. So much of the population considers Syriza to have failed on its promises for less austerity. My position is that much of the middle class have been overtaxed and have been considering Syriza as being a very against business and anti-free market economy. So this is the ticket that Syriza was voted on, and it failed to deliver on its promises.
Let me bring in Vicky Price here from London. The Greek economy was in a huge mess at the time Syriza won the election there, and now after 4.5 years they haven't managed to deliver. Some of that blame has to be put with the European Union, surely. It put too stringent conditions on the Syriza party. There was too much belt tightening for a country that was struggling to actually afford a belt.
Well, the European Union and the IMF put rather stringent conditions on Greece even before Syriza came to power. So we mustn't forget that we already had a number of bailouts before. Since 2010, of course, the situation had deteriorated and the economy was sinking. It lost about 25% of its output before even Syriza came to power. So they didn't inherit anything particularly solid or safe. And of course, in addition to all this, because of course there had been quite a lot of delay in reaching an agreement after they were voted in 2015. We had about 5-6 months of negotiations. We didn't go anywhere. We had even worse conditions put on, such as capital controls. So the Greek economy suffered even more, not as severely as it was doing before, but certainly there was no recovery for a bit. It took a little while before some signs of improvement were there, and we've seen that recently. I think it's mostly because basically there is a limit to how much you can fall. I mean, naturally, there are forces that start bringing you up again. And of course, there has been some debt restructuring, and there has been a little bit of investment, although investment is still very, very poor in Greece, and a return of confidence. There is now construction going on in Greece for the first time in ages. You know, when I visit Greece, and I do that very regularly, I was there last week, suddenly there were new buildings going up, something I hadn't seen in 10 years. So there has been a change of sorts. But I think there's one positive thing about Syriza. I mean, as I said, it inherited a very, very difficult situation. I think the Europeans did not understand what they were doing to a considerable extent when they were imposing those conditions on Greece. But what Syriza did manage to do is get lots of implementation of measures without too much sort of disruption in the economy, in the sense of demonstrations, strikes. There were a few, but nothing like as many, I'm guessing, as there would have been if they had we had actually a right-wing government like New Democracy trying to implement those measures. There would have been a lot more disruption in the economy. And what you have to be astonished and actually be admiring in what Tsipras has done is that he was voted on a left-wing ticket, very radical left-wing ticket. He actually implemented a right-wing policy very effectively, and he's still there. He has not lost completely in terms of support. If you look at the opinion polls, he has been receiving about 24, 25%, sometimes 28% of the vote for quite some time now. So he's still there. There's still a lot of support for him, despite what the Greeks have gone through.
Let me just bring in Dimitris here, Dimitris Rapidis in Athens here. You have gone through some tough times with the political party, but there seems to be quite a positive note coming out from London that some things did change. Why isn't that reflected at the opinion polls? Why is it likely that they will lose the election?
Well, it's actually, yeah, there's a positive sign from London, but it's mostly what I told you before. Actually, the Syriza government, Tsipras government, did implement a number of progressive, did implement a progressive agenda in many different areas. Just to identify a couple of those, the first is on the healthcare system. The government inherited a debt of around 70 billion euros on public hospitals, and it managed to create a surplus of 70 million euros, giving at the same time free access to primary healthcare system to more than 2.5 million uninsured people. This is something big. This is a big achievement to my view from the government. The second is that despite the fact that we're still having a long way to go to create quality jobs and to increase our salaries and wages, we did manage to lower the unemployment rate from around 27 in the beginning of 2015 to 18.5% today, which is also a huge achievement, considering the fact that, yes, we actually didn't have big investments. We didn't actually have the creation of high-income jobs. But at the end of the day, we did manage to improve mostly all social and financial indicators. Why today we're in such difficult position electorally is that, as I told you before, there's still a long way to go. We didn't pass from the nightmare to a paradise, but actually we're still managing to drag the country outside the crisis. We did concluded with the third bailout deal successfully, but we're still facing a crisis, a social and economic crisis, and people possibly expected much more from our side, and we should have done possibly much more than we have already made so far.
Yanis, also in Athens, it seems to me that we have a situation here now where we have the Syriza party very much looking after and doing things that were unpopular, but ultimately they did work. However, New Democracy is much more centre-right, it's much more pro-business, and when it comes to implementing austerity measures, it's going to be a lot tougher, perhaps, than Syriza ever will be. That might be popular with the middle-class vote, but it's going to alienate the more poorer voters within Greece. And in 4 years' time, are you likely to be facing a situation where the poor actually vote out democracy, a New Democracy party, because they didn't get what they wanted? Is it just a merry-go-round, is what I'm actually asking you?
Well, this is an interesting question because for the first time in the European elections, we've seen parts of the youth, young people voting for new democracy, and also pensioners voting for new democracy as well, despite the negative campaigning of Syriza. So Kyriakos Mitsotakis came out with a positive agenda saying we're not going to scrap the social security situation, we're not going to raise taxes, we're going to lower taxes, we're going to lower the VAT. There are some question marks, though, where this is going to come from, all these cuts and the less austerity, but still this positive agenda catched the people, even the lower wage people. There are some people that are afraid about the wage, about the social inequality, and this is an issue that the new government needs to face. Mr. Mitsotakis wants to have a free market and very pro-investment friendly economy. This needs to be seen how this new idea, this new model of economy can be inclusive for all parts of the society, not just the middle class or the upper classes. How the lower classes, especially the youth, which are much unemployed, can come into this growth-friendly environment, this market-friendly environment, and become part of the new wealth that's going to be created.
It's a very interesting point he's making there. Vicky Price, I want to bring you in here. We've seen time and time again, EU, IMF, World Bank, bailouts, loans, etc., all come at a very high cost for the country that's implementing them. A classic example is, say, probably Pakistan, which is going through a restructuring of its debt right now with the IMF, but it's putting in place very unpopular policies as a cost of doing that. That drives social change within the country itself because, and we've seen it in Pakistan, we've seen it in Greece, people rising up, people getting out in the streets, people protesting, and then people blaming poor people and immigrants for the situation that they're in. Is there a better way of doing this without causing this belt tightening that is so restrictive?
Well, there is, and I think the IMF itself was told by its own economists that what it was doing was going to be counterproductive, because basically you enter into a sort of vicious cycle and you just can't get out of it, except once you reach bottom, really. So what happens is if you try and reduce the deficit very fast, which is exactly what was going on in Greece, then you institute all sorts of measures which include cutting back spending, obviously, raising taxes repeatedly, which was exactly what happened in Greece, cutting pensions, which again is exactly what happened in Greece, reducing wages more generally, which was also a serious problem for loads of Greeks. And that, of course, leads to spending less money out in the shops, collecting less taxes. So they were told that at various stages that they should watch out for that possibility happening, which would mean that you need to think again and have perhaps a slightly different way of looking at how a country needs to adjust. So we shouldn't do it too fast and not so strictly. And of course, you alienate people. There is no real middle class left in Greece. About 500,000 young educated Greeks have emigrated, and we know from research that's been done recently that 4 out of 10 of those Greeks have no intention of coming back, certainly not over the next 10 years. But yes, there are problems in Greece that we have to deal with, and maybe New Democracy will be able to do it faster. Syriza should have perhaps privatized faster. It should have reduced bureaucracy considerably more quickly than it's been doing. It hasn't been functioning badly, but it has not been given the impression to foreign investors that it's really open for business, and it needed to do more. Tsipras himself has been traveling around trying to attract more investment. He's actually realized that, and I've been to some events that he's actually spoke at here in London. But of course, when you have this bureaucracy, when you have concerns that come in, such as environmental issues supposedly that stop redeveloping great big chunks of bits of Athens, like the airport, is finally moving towards that direction. But it puts people off in terms of really coming in and spending money in a country when they just don't know whether the conditions are going to be such to allow them to get something out of it. And there are so many areas that Greece can develop that needs a proper strategy for growth. I think it can be done, but I think, going back to your original question, the damage that the EU and the policies, yes, of course, Greeks were to blame up to a point, but the damage that those types of policies have done will take a very long time to get over, and people will be suspicious of politicians, of any promises that are made to them. And I think New Democracy will suffer if it can't deliver in the future, assuming it gets elected, of course, today.
Dimitris in Athens, is this then the fault of old Northern Europe, France, Germany, really pushing forward and pushing on Greece these policies of austerity, and perhaps knowing that it was going to put Greece and the political system there under pressure?
Well, actually, the very system of Eurozone is badly structured, which is that the targets of the Stability and Growth Pact cannot be met in such a fragile financial environment in the EU and Eurozone. And Greece, along with other member states, but especially Greece, was the experiment for the implementation of harsh austerity in Europe. We have seen in the recent past, we are already observing actually similar problems with public deficit and over-indebtedness by other member states, like, for instance, in Italy. But in Greece, the situation was much tougher comparing to other member states. Why? Because for two main reasons. The first was that for the last 30 years, all previous governments didn't manage to create a sustainable, viable growth model that the majority could benefit from, and at the same time tackle efficiently bureaucracy and some state burdens that could create a more friendly environment for investments, for instance. So Syriza inherited such a bad situation, and it's very unfair to exert some harsh criticism on the government that within only 4 years managed to create to tackle all those problems and issues that were inherited by the previous governments. The second thing is that we did see in the previous years that there was a problem with the Syriza government when it was negotiating with its European partners austerity politics, which is the first critical semester of 2015.
Sorry,
yes.
Dimitris, we are running out of time, and I would like to bring in Yanis Koutsametis to counter your point. It's an interesting thing. There were changes happening. Syriza did do something to improve the economy. Now we have likely to be a new government in Greece with New Democracy, but the old allies, the old players still exist. It's France, it's Germany, it's the EU, and they have very specific things that they want Greece to do. Are they going to give this new government, potentially, if it does win the election, a much more sympathetic ear than they did the last one?
Well, this is the $1 million euro question, because both the Syriza party and New Democracy are promising that there will be a renegotiation of the fiscal targets for the next years for Greece. I see that as extremely difficult, at least for the short future. The distant future, yes, we could have some renegotiation, but first of all, a new government should indicate, not only indicate, but prove that it's very pro-reforms, very pro-open market, and it's willing to make these necessary changes in the Greek public sector and the Greek economy that needs to have a more growth-friendly economy. This time, there will be some friendly gestures from Eurozone partners, but there needs to be proof in the next months that the new government is really going to implement reforms, because Syriza did this specific mistake. They implemented the austerity without implementing reforms, as the Portuguese left-wing government did. Together with a hard left opposition in Portugal, they implemented reforms and they didn't have any problem with the population or even the lower class people. But Syriza was very hesitant in implementing reforms, and now they want to backtrack on the reforms that already have been agreed with the Eurozone partners.
I just want to thank our panel of experts, Dimitris Rapidis, Vicky Price and Yanis Koutsametis. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.